All right. How is it going, Minsk? Having a good time on the conference, right? Are you, Marcin?
Always.
Great. So we're here to talk about how to test your message-driven systems. And maybe let's start by sharing why we actually do this kind of talk. It's because mainly as an industry, we have a feeling that we talk about how to test, for instance, HTTP-based communication, but we don't spend much time on talking about how to test your systems which use messaging, right?
Correct.
So maybe let's introduce ourselves. My name is Jakub Pilimon. I work as principal technologist / developer advocate at Pivotal. I work mainly using domain-driven design. I like to talk about architecture, test-driven development, and Spring, of course. So I have a Twitter account. I blog occasionally, and I'm a co-founder of DDD by Examples initiative, which is basically a set of projects that aim as a bridge, you might say, between people who would like to model their domain according to DDD rules and principles, and then back it up with Spring in the infrastructure layer. So if you're interested in that, if you would like to collaborate with us, please find us at GitHub and drop us a line.
So my name is Marcin Grzejszchak, and I also work for Pivotal at the Spring Cloud team. I'm leading the projects called Spring Cloud Sleuth, Spring Cloud Contract, and I'm also very interested in the topics of CI/CD. My Twitter handle is @mgrzejszchak, and you can find it also at my blog, toomuchcoding.com. So we're going to have a little role play here. I'm going to simulate that I'm an architect, an ivory tower architect in a hypothetical company. If you've been to my talk yesterday, it can be the same company because we don't have a lot of budget for good people there.
Which company was that?
A hypothetical company. So I'm an ivory tower architect there, and we needed a consultant because we need to do some coding, some features, typical stuff.
You say
we have to earn money or something like this.
You need to deliver value.
I never do this. I just oversee other people. But the budget is extremely low, so the only person we could afford is Jakub. Yeah, welcome, Jakub.
Yeah. It's almost for free, by the way. It's like $10 per hour.
Yeah. So maybe I'm going to introduce you to what we do in the company first, right?
Right.
So we deal with credit cards, right? So we issue credit cards.
Nice.
And we have a verification that if somebody, wants to steal some money from us, so we do some fraud verification, then we don't grant the card, which is obvious, right?
Makes sense.
And now, the thing is that the business wants new stuff. Can you imagine? Like new features.
No.
It's
Never
insane.
happened to me in my
It's
entire
insane.
lifetime.
It's insane. And they want them now, on production. So that feature is that if, for example, we reject somebody, we don't grant the card, we should notify that client. So we have some sort of a notification service, like prototype somewhere out there. But
is it an external system, process,
it's an
service?
It's an external application. It's an application that we write. I mean, when I say we, it's not me because I can't code. But I'm pretty sure that the business will not stop there. They want this information to be propagated to other services. They just don't know it yet. But
How can you tell that right now?
Experience, my friend, experience. That's the only thing I have. I don't have expertise, I have experience. So I feel that they will want to propagate this knowledge further and further on to other apps.
All right.
So that's the first thing.
So let me summarize, because as a consultant, I get to hear you and then repeat what you said. Right?
Yeah, and you get paid for that.
So you're saying that you have an application which deals with credit card, and you need to notify other services which are external, and if they are down, it shouldn't affect the process of granting the card.
Absolutely. That's the critical part of our system. So if other systems are down, something is slow, it can't influence the main process of granting cards. That's
And for now, there's one application, but you have a gut feelings that there will be more in the future.
I'm pretty sure it's
All right, got it.
So you know what? I think that code speaks more than 1,000 words.
Nicely said.
I think some writer wrote it 100 years ago. So let's go through the tests, because we have some tests.
Can you introduce me to the test? Like, what do they do? What kind of test is that?
So here we have an integration test that essentially verifies that if you're born in the 70s and later, you should be able to get the card. Actually, it's written here.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Should be able to make sense.
Yeah. So if you're born, before the 70s, you're not going to get the card.
How do you check if the person was born in the 70s or not?
So we have a very sophisticated MVP algorithm You know these MVP algorithms, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we just verify the first 2 digits.
Of the client ID.
Yeah, and this is the year. of the
Ah,
birth.
all right.
The rest doesn't matter, actually. Like, you can put random stuff there.
All right, so this is the sophisticated risk-checking algorithm, you might
Yeah,
say.
because, you know, we started with an MVP, and then the business said, let's go to production with that. That's typical what happens, right? So this is the thing.
One more thing, is it an end-to-end test?
It's an integration test that starts the application to the context, right? Because we're using Spring.
All
Sends a
right.
request, and we verify the response. 200 if it's okay, 403, I guess, if it's not okay.
Can I go inside?
Of course.
What's inside of this controller?
I'm also interested in what's there. Okay, so this is a controller that delegates work to the application service.
All right,
So
so
let's
this is
go
an
to the-
application service,
yeah.
and I'm suspecting there is the business logic.
So am I. Okay, so here we have the method. So essentially, maybe you can try to, you know, understand this code, like what it
If
does.
born before 70s, and this is the risk-checking algorithm, all right, then you don't get the card, otherwise you get the card with a default limit.
This is why you get the big bucks, man, and you're bright.
And the credit card gets saved to the database.
Yeah,
Probably
exactly.
MySQL or Postgres, something like that.
So, so over here, where there's this new line, I think, like I have a gut feeling, that here we would, for example, notify another service that you're not getting the card.
You're saying about this notification
Yeah.
service, right?
So what I would do is I would do a REST call to service
A.
A.
All right, and
Right.
then if you have second service?
So wait. So this is the first situation, and now this is the second situation where, you know, there's a situation where we granted the card.
All right, so that's a nice starter, but what happens if there are like more services, as you said, that might be interested in this information? So I guess your
Come
next
on.
step,
This is like I'm going to show you some magic
Alright.
here. Right? This is why I get paid for the big bucks, right? If there are more services, you do Command D, right? You do the copy, and you just change B, C, etc. Right?
all right, you can leave it
And
like
the
this.
same
I
thing
understand.
below, right?
And the same here,
Because
here.
in our company we are paid by the lines of code.
How was it? Command D?
Command D.
All right. Oh. B and C, all right.
Does it make sense?
I don't know, you tell me. What happens if the one of them is not responding?
I knew it. So I've been to a conference, and they said that I should reply with the word circuit breaker to you.
All right, so
So
I was
circuit
worried.
breaker.
I was worried that you would say that. How come a circuit breaker can help? Like how we are going to retry? How we are going to be eventually consistent
Okay,
with
so
that?
so with retries we can do while true, a loop, right? While true, and hystrix.
And then what? That's it?
I don't know. That's why you're.
What happens
Here.
if the second service is really, really slow? Then the process of granting the card, which is crucial for your business, you just said that, will be affected, right?
Okay, I didn't think about this. Yeah, so that's a problem.
So do you have any other solution maybe?
No, if I did, you weren't here.
All right. So, you know, I'm a professional, and before coming here, I
This
was
is-
scheming
This
for
is
your
the
code
best
base.
joke right now from this presentation.
I was scheming for your code base and your architecture. I'm familiar with that. And I know that you already use some sort of messaging, right?
Oh yeah, we do. Yeah, it's
So-
RabbitMQ.
You use RabbitMQ, and you'd already contact RabbitMQ from this specific service, right?
If you say so.
I know that. So how about if there's already an infrastructure in place for that, maybe, just an idea, if you just said that something has happened, like, I don't know, in this case, the application was rejected, right?
Okay.
Right? So you send the message like this, just one line of code, and here what? Card was granted, right?
Okay.
Does it make sense so far?
So you're saying that instead of knowing exactly every single service that we have to call and knowing their endpoints
Yep.
to which we have to send the message and what kind of a request should be there, we will send.
Waiting for the response.
Yeah, exactly. So we would send out a message to the broker and wait for others to consume it.
Yeah, you would
Okay.
send a message which is written in the past tense, as you might say, which is an event, you might say.
Oh, okay.
Right? So instead of communicating, you can just actually communicate with a message broker and delegate
Okay.
the whole work.
Oh, so it's about delegating, right? So I'm really good at delegating. Let's push the problem to somebody else.
Yeah, and let
like
the
it.
message broker handle that.
Let's do it.
Make sense?
So what are the benefits of this messaging approach?
So let's summarize. Are you familiar with this term temporal coupling?
Coupling related to time, I guess.
Good. So in a nutshell, with messaging, you kind of get rid of this temporal coupling because those two applications, they don't need to be alive at the same time in order for them to communicate. Does it make sense?
Because you send a message, and if there's another, let's say, service that consumes it, it's going to consume it. If not, it's going to consume it later, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
If it's a durable subscriber to your RabbitMQ exchange or topic, then it's going to work out of the box. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the temporal coupling gone.
Okay. That's good.
Throttling. So how about if your consumer would actually be able to consume the messages at its own pace so that the producer doesn't overwhelm that?
So with HTTP, we'll have to use some sort of a back pressure, but you
can
don't
use-
always have it, right? So yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, you already have the messaging in place, so you can use that, right?
That's a good idea.
If there are more services in the future interested in this information that the card was granted or the application was rejected, you just need to connect them, and the producer doesn't know who the consumers are, the consumers don't know who the producer is,
I get it. Makes sense.
right? Also, you get for free, you eliminate spatial coupling, which means that those two applications, they don't even need to see each other in your network and even know about each other. So
I was
logical
thinking
coupling is gone.
that maybe service discovery could fix this problem, but no, really, right? Because even though we don't have to know exactly the name of the instance, we still have to know the name of the app, the service,
Yeah,
right?
the business-facing
yeah,
name.
yeah, yeah. So okay, makes sense. I like it. Let's go with this approach.
And this place, you just invert the control.
I like it.
Right?
Let's do it.
So, as I said, I was skimming through the code base before coming here because I'm a pro. And, I know that you already started some work about how to publish the events to the message broker.
We did?
In this case, the RabbitMQ. You have this interface. You wrote that. I checked.
What
in
does
Git.
it do exactly? Domain event publisher. Let's check out the docs, the
It's
Java
a
docs.
domain event publisher with one publish method called publish.
So domain events publisher responsible for publishing domain events. So good.
It's an interface. Yes.
Publishes domain events.
Makes sense,
Let's
right?
do it. Let's use it.
So we need this component to be injected in our apply for card service because somewhere here we will be calling the domain event publisher,
Okay.
right? As I also said, I know what you are doing in your code bases. I know that you do some sort of testing, right?
Oh, it's a overstatement.
Yeah, but I have seen some classes like in here.
Okay, so we have we're doing TDD because we start with a test, and we don't write the body of the test. So it's always green. So we skip the red and refactor thing.
All right, I'm a good old-fashioned, consultant, so I'm familiar only with the older technique. I will do right now a test up front for publishing an event depending on how old or young the borrower is.
Okay,
Make sense?
let's do it.
So we need the domain event publisher, right? In here, domain event publisher, it's gonna be stub or mock. Do you know the difference?
No,
You don't know the difference.
no, I don't.
So on mock, you verify behaviors.
Oh, okay.
Right?
So if I have because you're using Spock here, like from Groovy, so
You use Spock.
I use Spock, sorry. So if you have a Mockito, there's no explicit distinction there, right?
Yeah.
So if you do a mock, our sheet can be a stub, but if you do a verify, then it's a mock.
Exactly.
Okay, I get it.
So you are familiar with this.
Now I am.
So what we should do in this test, we should simulate that someone's applying for a card and the person was born in what? 70s?
Yeah,
Like
or
this?
later.
I guess there is no client ID verification.
No,
right?
no.
So when this happens, then what? Then the domain event publisher was called one time.
So this is the verify from Mockito, right?
Exactly. And the argument is something like card granted.
Also, you're verifying whether actually the method on the domain event publisher interface was called with an argument of type card granted.
Because that's the message we expect, the event we expect, right?
Okay.
Card granted. In this case, I'm going to do copy-paste.
Oh, I love this technique. It's good.
So 55, I guess.
Shouldn't you go to Stack Overflow first?
Let's see if it's green and then.
Okay.
So card application rejected, right?
Okay.
If I run it,
No,
it
no,
should
I
fail.
mean, we have to, I guess, inject it to the
Yeah,
service,
yeah.
right?
That's what I said. If I run it, it fails
Okay.
because we need to inject that, right? Which means we have to. Do I need a constructor here?
I don't think you need a constructor. We can use the existing one.
Yeah. So I'll just add it in here like this. Makes sense so far?
Yeah, yeah.
Let's go back to our test and see if it fails,
So red-green refactor, right? First red.
but without refactor this time.
Okay.
So let's see if it's green. It's red.
Good.
Good. Let's
Too few invocations. Okay.
That makes sense. In this case, we are going to publish what? New card application rejected, and we pass client ID, right?
Okay.
When the card was granted, oops, domain event publisher publish new card granted. What do we need here? We need card ID. I guess we can take it from the card. We need card limit, and we need what? Client ID.
Okay, now let's run it.
If I run it right now, and if it's green, can we go to production?
Yes, commit, push with force to production.
You sure?
Yes.
I have a feeling that we missed something.
Oh, wait a second. Did you actually implement the interface?
No, I didn't.
I didn't either, so... Oh, it's passing because you were using a mock, right? And you injected the mock yourself. Okay.
So clearly it's not enough. I mean,
It's good.
it's good enough, but it's not enough.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that with those unit tests, you would like to have a bunch of those for every possible event, but then maybe you have like 1 or 2 integration tests to see if the implementation of the domain publisher works, right?
Okay, let's do it.
So wait a minute. So you use Spring Boot, right?
Yes.
And you use RabbitMQ.
Correct.
What do you use to communicate from Spring Boot to RabbitMQ? What kind of framework?
I think it was called Spring Cloud Stream.
Oh, so you use Spring Cloud Stream. Do you know how it works?
More or less.
So with Spring
With
Cloud
an
Stream,
emphasis on less.
all right. So I will just explain briefly, like in maybe 4 sentences. So with Spring Cloud Stream, what you have is an application core logic, right?
Okay.
In which we talk about input and output channels, business-facing channels,
Okay.
right? And then the framework binds the channels to actual middleware, be it RabbitMQ, maybe Kafka, maybe Google PubSub, maybe AWS
How does
Kinesis.
it do it?
Auto-configuration, magic, or engineering.
Okay. So you're saying that if I change one broker to another one,
Yeah.
I don't have to change any code for this to make...
Application core logic remains the same. Probably some properties will be changed, but the thing is that it's agnostic to the middleware, the logic.
Okay, great.
Make sense?
Now I get it.
So let's use Spring Cloud Stream to actually talk to our broker. What I do right now, I need to implement the interface.
Okay.
How to call it?
So it's a domain event publisher that
To RabbitMQ.
publishes to RabbitMQ.
Is
To
it good enough?
RabbitMQ event publisher sounds good.
Make sense? All right. I'll make it public. I have a feeling that you will need it soon. And then what? So,
Maybe you should make it bigger.
yeah, that makes sense. So let's go back to the main class. As you can see, we have enabled binding to source.
Okay.
Source is the definition of our channels.
Okay,
You
continue.
want to go inside? I want to
Yeah.
enable software. Thanks. So you define the list of the channels you're going to talk to. Some of them are predefined and they come with the framework. For instance, the source, which says, I'm going to talk without output channel, without one output channel called output.
Oh, I
That's it.
remember there was also sync for input, right? A
yeah.
processor which is both. Because
All right.
these are the typical use cases.
So now what I can do is I can inject the definition of channels, right?
Okay.
Source, like this. Which one is it? Source, import, this one. Do I need a constructor?
Yes.
All right. And this as simple as that. Source output dot send new message, generic message, and event. So the payload. But with HTTP-based communication, you have some sort of metadata, for instance, with the form of headers.
Okay.
In messaging, it would be handy as well to have those, right?
Yeah, because we will send the messages to the same topic, and we would like to somehow tell the difference between the types, right?
Exactly. So I can pass the type of the event as a header, like this,
Oh, that was neat.
as the second parameter, and
Okay.
that's it.
So we're going to have the header with the name type that would tell us what kind of a type of the event we have.
Correct.
Okay.
But we forgot about something.
We did?
About tests, right?
Oh, yeah.
So let's start. We should have started
mean-
with the tests, right?
We're not paid to write tests. We're paid to deliver business value.
All right. So I'm paid for the amount of time I spend with you.
Okay.
So the more I spend, the more I get. I'll write some tests. Why not? So this test, it's already started and committed in your code base. And this test uses JUnit.
Oh, and you're the author, actually. This is interesting.
Yeah. So we use JUnit. Why? Why use both?
Oh, yeah,
both?
because we are full stack developers, my friend, which means that we can do bugs and all sorts of frameworks and languages.
Doesn't make much sense. All right. So I need domain event publisher, right?
Yeah.
This is going to be fully blown integration test. We are going to bootstrap the whole context of Spring.
Yeah, but we don't want to actually really send a message to the broker, right?
You're saying we don't want to rely on running instance of RabbitMQ
Yeah.
during the test.
No.
So, any idea?
Maybe you can mock the bean. So if it's Spring, maybe try using an annotation.
annotation.
Mock bean, maybe. Oh, there is one.
All right, good. So, okay, we are going to mock it out, and then what? When someone applies for a card, and the person was born in this case, granted, so 70s, right?
Yes.
So like this. Then we expect that the component called domain-driven publisher was called how many times?
Once.
Once, and with an argument which matches this. It's a card granted class. Good enough?
Yeah.
What do you think? And again, copy paste. And I'm changing to 55. And here we expect what?
Card application rejected.
So this is going to be integration test. Probably you don't need an integration test for every specific event, but one of them would be enough.
Okay,
right?
let's run it.
I will run it. If it's green,
Commit git push -f, and let's do it.
and go to production.
Of course. Or SCP the jar to production directly.
And to get paid, I need a full hour. So I'm going to think about some. Maybe you will just, I will just run the app locally. That's what I do before going to production.
What?
Yeah. That's what I do.
Wait. So you're wasting so much time because you wrote the test. We didn't pay you to write the test. You wrote the test. The tests are passing. The unit tests are passing. The integration tests are passing. And now you're wasting our time to run the application, even though all the tests are green.
Oops. The application
failed to start. What does it mean?
What does it mean?
I have no idea. Maybe the
Parameter
application
one
failed to start.
of constructor required a bean
Can you copy paste it to Google
to Stack Overflow.
and then to Stack Overflow?
But it's Saturday. Nobody's going to answer.
Oh yeah. So can you scroll to the left? Like what's there actually in the message? Parameter 1 of constructor.
Why is it gray? All right. I think.
Oh, wait. So okay. So we've forgotten to mark it as a bean, but the tests have passed.
So there's some sort of bug.
There is a bug in Spring.
In mock bean. Yeah. There's a bug because clearly there wasn't any bean of this type and the test passed. So I think the mock bean is wrongly implemented.
File an issue at
All
GitHub.
right. Again, Saturday. Maybe I'm going to do something really crazy. I'm going to read the Java docs of mock bean.
What? What are those? I have never seen them. This is the documentation?
Yeah, you can actually read it.
Nobody does it.
Any existing single bean of the same time defined in the context will be replaced by the mock.
Okay.
That's what we wanted.
Yeah.
If no existing bin is defined, anyone will be all right. So that's
That's a bug.
That's wrong.
Or a feature, I guess.
Who did that?
Phil Webb. I knew it.
No, this guy. All right. So
actually, we didn't mark it as a bean. So mock bean created one for us.
yeah. So by the way, while you were talking, I sketched the whole architecture of yours.
Okay.
It's that simple. You have the controller, which talks to apply for card service, credit card, database, domain name publisher, and the other app.
Okay.
So let's summarize what we have done so far.
Okay.
Before going further. The first test took into examination the apply for card service in isolation. That's fair. It was good test-driven development, led us into good design. We can see if specific events are emitted or not, but then we needed something more for one event, maybe for two of them, to see if the actual implementation of the main event publisher works. That's why we created this test. So we started the whole context of Spring with the repo, with the web layer as well. Even in-memory database, we should have used probably test containers, right? But we used H2 database for that. So it's actually longer. It takes ages to finish, and it doesn't give us any more assurance because the main event publisher was mocked out. So it doesn't make sense. But
It gives us more assurance, but still there are problems.
so we need something more.
Yeah.
We would like to test this code, actually, the main event publisher, which we just have written.
Wait a second. It reminds me of one thing, because we are using Spring Cloud Stream.
Correct?
And you said yourself that the idea of Spring Cloud Stream is to abstract the sending and receiving of messages from the broker, from the infrastructure, so to say.
Correct.
I remember that they mentioned at a conference that you can actually, for tests, use a test binder. So instead of using a RabbitMQ binder or a Kafka binder, you can use a test binder, which will be essentially an in-memory queue.
So we can actually collect the messages in a java.util.blocking queue.
Yeah, maybe that will help us.
So this is how it would work. You have to auto-wire the message collector to collect the messages.
That's a good name.
And then you have the definition of channels as well,
Okay.
as we used to have in the previous, in our implementation. And then it's how we actually teach the framework to collect all of the events related to this channel in this specific collection.
Makes sense.
Super simple, right? So we can actually write those tests from scratch, copy pasting, of course.
Of course.
When someone applies for a card and the person was born in, I'm going to do soft wrap. Good. In 70s, right? Oops. This is good enough.
Yeah.
Then what?
So we used to verify if a mock was executed, but now we want to see if something is in the queue with a given type of the message, right?
So we can actually poll the queue. We can, for instance, check its headers, and if we can see if it contains some specific value.
Because we had the event type header, right?
In this case, it's called card-application dash rejected. Rejected? No.
But actually, this should be able to get,
Yeah,
so
so it's
should
granted.
granted.
But underneath, again, copy pasting, 55, and in this case we expect what?
Application rejected.
No typo? No typo. Let's run those tests, and this test would have caught the problem with missing bin, right?
Correct, because we start everything, we don't mock anything out, and we say that put all the messages to this blocking queue.
And it's green.
Good.
Actually, it's green. Can we go to production?
Of course we can, but the thing is,
We still need
it takes a lot of time actually to to verify those things, like start them and.
Yeah, I need like 20 minutes more. So you know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to run the first tab, the producer. There is, just by accident, running an instance of RabbitMQ on this machine. Just I'm running it everywhere. And I have seen that you have started some work about this consumer app, so this client notification.
So you want to do an end-to-end test of both apps?
Manual testing, because I need more time.
Okay, so let me maybe show you what we have there in the
right.
application. Let's do the soft wraps again.
Need help?
Yeah. Okay. So we have a listener component that essentially also uses Spring Cloud Stream.
So this is how you listen to information, to messages using Spring Cloud Stream and Spring Boot, right?
Correct. So we're saying we have an input channel because previously we had an output channel.
It's enabled in here. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
So here we're going to listen, poll for messages. But we have two different methods used for two different types of events. So we verify the headers, their type, and if it's card granted, we will log things out because it's an MVP. We don't have more time to do it. And if it's card application rejected, we're going to reject something else.
All right, so let's run the consumer. Let's start it. And let's go back to the producer, which is in here. Let's run it as well. If the both applications are up, there is also Rabbit in the middle running on this machine, which means if I do right now HTTP post to the producer with some sort of card application, I should get either HTTP 200
or 404,
depending on the client ID.
Exactly.
So let's do the post somewhere in here, probably. Yeah, so this is curl localhost 8080 applications, right? The content type JSON, and the client ID is for free, which means we are expecting what?
404.
All right,
Good.
we got it. How about this example? We
So
expect
200.
200.
And something.
We changed the actual client ID, right?
Correct.
So two apps are working. I guess RabbitMQ transferred the information to the consumer.
Yeah.
So we should see something in the logs.
Let's check it out.
Let's go back here. Consumer application. It's rejected, it's granted. I think my job is done here. Basically, we can go to production. Here's my invoice. Please pay me. You have like 3 days.
Can we make the font bigger here, my friend?
Here it goes.
We can pay you as much money as there in the bracket. You can't divide by it.
It's not even a number.
But
why? I
you
did
tell
my job.
me. So for sure, I'm really fed up with you because you constantly push your problems to somebody else. You blame it on some other people. Who are you going to blame it on?
It's not my fault, man. I mean, I did my job.
Why is there a null value there?
It's not my fault.
Whose fault is it?
No, this Jackson.
Jackson. Like Peter Jackson? Michael Jackson?
No, Jackson, the mapper,
Jackson the Mapper. It's the name of the movie?
the framework. Jackson serializer / deserializer. Probably there's something wrong with the configuration of Jackson, or your POJOs representing the events don't have getters and setters like this. That's Jackson's fault. That's not my fault.
Okay.
It's your fault and Jackson's fault.
Let's try to fix it then.
So if I go here to the producer side and I change client ID so that it
Oh,
has
wait
the
a second.
getter.
So we have only the type here, right? We don't have a getter for client
Yeah,
ID,
so
right?
Default configuration of Jackson works like this. That it listens and it looks for getters and setters, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to add the getter. Where is that? Create getter. So now if I rerun the messaging app, so the producer app,
Okay.
which is this one, I guess.
So you're saying that we are sending a wrong message, right?
That's what I'm predicting. But it's all Jackson's fault.
Okay.
It started. Now if I do rejection, so HTTP post
44,
with
right.
something. So I'm going to clear it maybe. 43.
Okay.
403, that's expected. And in the log statement, oops, as you can
Okay.
see, now you can actually pay me. I solved 2 problems just by accident.
And you know what? It works. The testing approach where you start the apps works, but it takes a lot of time to actually run the apps. Now we have only 2. What if we have more? Like, there has to be a better way.
So maybe let's go back to here, because currently, before we tested the whole application except for domain event publisher, but then we came up with this
Okay.
idea of testing binder. We actually put under test. So we get our domain event publisher under testing harness, right?
Okay.
And it's actually the same code in the production and in tests, thanks to Spring Cloud Stream testing
Correct.
binder. But we didn't test the communication, like what's the schema of the message, what gets serialized, deserialized, etc., etc.
Okay.
Right? Because we didn't want to bring up the RabbitMQ. So I did that manually and I found a mistake. And now you're saying that we need to somehow automate that.
That would be good.
To be honest, in fairness, I have no idea how to do that. And now I kind of regret talking you out of this HTTP-based solution, because with HTTP, what you can do is exactly, you can actually get the contract. And actually yesterday there was this guy talking about contract. He kind of looked like you. And it was
Beautiful talk. Fantastic talk. Really.
I was there like, this was like, extremely boring, to be honest.
I saw you leave in the middle.
Yeah, I left in the middle. But anyways, it was all about HTTP-based.
If you stayed until the end, you would have known that you can do exactly the same thing, like contract tests with messaging.
All right,
Yeah,
continue.
Let's get to the code. I'm going to show you.
That's going to solve the problem?
Of course it will.
All right,
Show me the code. Where is it? Here.
it's here.
So, if you stay until the end, you would have seen an example of such a contract. Actually,
I tried really hard, trust me.
so we have an example of such a contract here. We don't have to go through all of it. In general, it describes that if there's some sort of an input on the producer side, some message will be sent somewhere else.
Why is it YAML?
Because it's the most frequently used language recently, and we want to be, go with the hype.
Can I use something different?
You could use Groovy DSL, for example. You have another example over here. It looks pretty much the same, but using Groovy. Anyways, from the contract, we generate tests. So if you go over here,
Like, what do you mean you generate tests? It doesn't make much sense.
so the framework, soft wraps. So the Spring Cloud contract framework converts the contract to a test. So this thing wasn't actually written by any developer. It was generated from the contract via the Spring Cloud contract plugin. So what it does, it's essentially sending out a message and then verifies whether the payload is fine and whether the headers are fine. So what I'm saying is, since it's a JUnit test,
All right,
you can actually run it and see if everything is parsed properly.
but what's this? What's this triggered by send rejected?
So on the producer side, like with HTTP, when you have a communication, it's a point-to-point blocking communication. You send a request and you block until you get the response.
All
Now
right,
with messaging, if you are a producer of the message, something has to happen to send out a message.
you need some sort of trigger.
You need the trigger. So here, the trigger will be a method called send rejected.
Do I have to implement this method?
Yes, you have to implement this method. We, let's see, print it out, but your
see.
generated test class extends a base class where you have to set up
Some sort of
some sort of
configuration.
configuration, right?
I
So-
guess we need this, right?
Correct. So we have in the base class, in the send rejected method, what we do is we actually use the domain event publisher, the same one we had previously, to send out a card application rejected message.
Wait a second. So this test was generated, and if I run it right now, it will catch the fact that there is no getter and setter? Like
If
this?
there's no getter and setter, because you fixed it, right?
I
So,
fixed for client ID, but I left timestamp.
oh,
from what I
okay. So
remember.
let's check it out, right? Because in the contract you said that timestamp is mandatory,
Let's check. All right, here.
right? And it matches some sort of a regular
Okay, I'm going
expression.
to run the test.
Let's run it.
So it should fail, right? Or
See
not?
about that. Oh, it did. Why did it fail? No results for path timestamp. So we're on the producer side, and we've managed to catch that we have
Keep talking, okay.
a bad serialization defined here, right? So apparently we need some sort of a getter.
So if I fix that and rerun it, and it becomes like what, the part of your pipeline, or how is
So
it
it's
executed?
it's a normal unit test that you're running, or
Alright.
integration test depending on what you set up. Even if you set up Spring Context, we can still say it's an integration test because it's an extremely fast test with small context.
It's green.
And it verifies if serialization is working fine.
So to sum up, your proposal is actually we can test left side, like in general, with the main web publisher itself, right? And then we don't need to set up the message broker during the tests, right?
We don't. Also,
but the communication will be tested. But I have a question. Can I use this contract somehow, like anyhow, at the consumer side?
of course, because on the left-hand side, on the producer side, we've managed to generate tests and stubs of this messaging communication. So then, on the consumer side, you can say, hey, can you simulate that the producer has sent me the message? And it's not the consumer that writes this concrete message. The message comes from the contract that was written by or coordinated with the producer. And it was tested against that producer.
So in other words, you can test the communication without the broker in the middle.
Correct.
And you are quite sure that it's going to work on production as well.
Of course, assuming that Spring Cloud contract has no bugs.
And?
Let's continue.
So is there any documentation for this kind of behavior?
I mean, apparently from what I see in the community, they think there's none because nobody reads the documentation. But yes, there is. If you go to cloudspring.io/Spring Cloud contract, you'll find the docs.
Did you read it, like entire documentation?
No, I only wrote it. I didn't read it.
So, to sum it up, we started with the unit test.
Correct.
It was enough to test the behavior if the events are emitted. We needed integration tests to check, like one of them or two of them, if actually we can communicate with some sort of framework.
Yes.
That's slower, but we need one of them. Then we use contracts to actually check if the message gets serialized properly, and we can use it the other side as well.
Yeah.
That's fine. So we are close to finish.
Yeah, I mean, production,
But-
man. Finally, production.
Oh, there's this thing. I wanted to tell you
Which thing?
at the very beginning. I was like pretty sure. I was pretty sure you would say something about that, but I think we kind of like we made a mistake at the very
Wait.
beginning.
Why are you talking about yourself with we?
Because we were just having a discussion, man. You know, you were there.
It's a monologue. What kind of a problem is there?
I think those lines, this one and that one, they may cause some problems. Can you spot that?
No, if I did, I would have
Yeah.
interrupted you.
What I was thinking. So the method is transactional, right?
Yes.
What does it mean?
So since we have a database storing some stuff in the database, so after we get out of the method, so after return of card, we will commit the transaction. And
Who is going to do that?
the framework?
The framework. Either commit or maybe rollback.
Oh yeah, I'll roll back if there was an exception from, yeah.
So let's examine a couple of scenarios.
Okay.
Let's say you get the card and you try to save it,
Okay.
and then you go here, the main event publisher says, you know what, I'm not available, connection exception.
Okay, so we tried to store it. We're waiting for the transaction to be committed. It wasn't. Nothing gets
rollbacked.
stored. Exactly. Nothing
Okay,
gets
that's
stored.
fine. So let's think about something different. We go here, the main event publisher says, fine, I got the message, you can continue.
Okay, so we told the whole world that the card is granted.
I didn't finish the sentence, but yes.
Okay.
More or less, you said to the domain event publisher, do something. That domain event publisher said, fine, I got it. Then you try to commit, and the database is down. It might happen, right?
Okay.
So, can you see any problem with that?
No,
to-
we just told the whole world that the card is granted, but we didn't store it in the database. It's called eventual consistency.
I think, I think it's called. I would rather call it like immediate inconsistency.
I mean, it's extreme case of eventual consistency because it will never be consistent.
Yeah. So that's,
Okay, so what is the problem?
that's against the definition of being eventually consistent.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying right now.
Okay. It can be problematic. I've seen worse things.
So
But
this is wrong. This is wrong, and not this.
you're using extremely harsh words.
This is wrong. This is totally wrong. We have to fix that. Any idea?
No.
All right. So just from the top of my head, you can actually swap the behavior. So you can firstly go to the database, try to commit. If
Okay.
it's successful, then go to the message broker or domain event publisher.
How can we do it?
With Spring, you can just, for instance, register a callback with transaction synchronization manager or something.
Oh,
like
this
that.
is the thing that you're going to tell Spring that,
Yeah.
for example, after commit, only after commit do something.
So I'll just move the method in here, and then
Oh.
it's gonna be invoked if and only if the transaction was successfully committed,
Okay.
hence the name after commit.
Okay, so wait. So we have a situation where we're going through the code, we've managed to successfully commit,
Yep.
and we're sending out a message. And we've managed, it's good, so we send it once. But we can have a situation where we tried to we managed to commit, and we failed to send it out.
Because our application went down or the broker is
Whatever.
not available.
So we will either send it 0 or 1 time.
Yeah, it even has a name. It's called at most once delivery. It's like fire and forget. You will try once.
But is it good? Is it bad?
I don't know. You tell me. It depends on the business behavior, like what we're trying to achieve. If the message contains some marketing information, then probably it's fine, right? Because every now and then you will lose this information and we are good to go. Right?
Okay, good. So this is one option. Is there something else?
Extreme edge case would be if the information is super crucial and you actually need to be consistent at some point in the future. Maybe it's like, that doesn't make any sense, but let's say that it contains PIN to your card,
Okay.
right?
So we can't use this approach to do it.
Yeah, in this case, message needs to be delivered at some point.
Okay, so how can
We
we
can
do
do
it?
something different. Let's roll it back. So you can actually use a different implementation of domain event publisher, which is called from database domain event publisher.
Okay.
So what you can do in here on publish, you don't go to message broker, you go to the exact same database in which we store cards. If the database supports ACID transactions, that means you either store both of them, so the state of the card and the event, or none of them,
Okay.
right? That's the first part.
Okay.
Does it make sense so
Yeah.
far?
So we have a list of events that were not sent out. Okay.
Yeah, and actually it has a name, it's called an outbox pattern, because then you have a scheduler, which actually goes through not yet sent messages to your database periodically, like 2 seconds. And then for each of those messages, we try to send them like we used to send
Okay, wait.
with the source output send generic message.
I see this transactional thing here again.
Yeah.
When we have the same problem. So let's go for this. So we, let's say, find an unsent message. We try to send it out. We fail. So we haven't marked it as sent.
That's good.
So we'll try again and again and again. And finally, after the 5th time, we've managed to send it out.
Yes.
So we'll send it either 1 or more times, right? And
Yeah.
we constantly try to send it out.
Yes, so it's called at least once delivery, because the message will be delivered, but it might be delivered more than one time.
Is it better?
I don't know, as we said, depending on the context,
okay.
right? If the consumer, on the other hand, if the consumer of this message can deduplicate the message, like by a unique ID, if it's an idempotent consumer, we actually can get exactly once processing. Make
Okay.
sense?
But for sure, you have a silver bullet.
No.
No, you have to have one. Like there has to be something, like a buzzword that you have to give us.
There's nothing you can do. That's the nature of distributed systems. What people...
So are you saying that we should have not gone to microservices and stick with the monolith?
Yeah, the best way to integrate
You should never say
services.
such things at a conference, man.
So what I'm saying is that in this case, you can choose either at most once, maybe at least once. So there is another option. Sometimes people
knew
use something which is called event sourcing. Have you heard about event sourcing?
I heard the buzzword.
So the thing is that if you think about that, you have state and you have list of events that led to this specific state.
Okay.
So can you derive list of the events from the state, or maybe you can derive from the events the state itself. Which one is it?
So if I have a list of events, from them I can derive the state, I guess.
In which case, you might say that the state, the current state, is the first level derivative of all of the events from the past.
Correct.
So if you just stored events somewhere, then you don't need to store both in the database and in the message broker because you just need to save events in the event store,
Yeah, that's correct.
right? And then you can derive state based on that. So there's no need to at least once, at most once, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
Right? But it has some drawbacks, like
what?
think about that. Use those events to create state, right?
Yes.
So it might say these are your implementation details, like database. Make sense?
Okay, so you're saying that we shouldn't share those.
Probably no, because if you actually use the same set of events for event sourcing and for integration purposes, you create a higher degree of coupling. It's like integrating via database. You are pretty familiar with that, right?
And that's wrong?
But it's, in most cases, it creates coupling, so it's wrong.
Okay.
In most cases, right? So the lesson learned from this is that actually think about if you really need that. Otherwise, think about maybe at least once or at most once it's enough. Be aware of code like this, transactional and modification in external system, because that's the path to failure.
Okay.
Do you have any more sophisticated questions?
I don't, but maybe someone in the audience has any questions. We have 5 minutes?
3.
3 minutes? So, yeah, there's a question there.
So thank you.
That was a question over
Any
there.
questions?
So in the meantime, we can have a question. Did it make any sense? Like, anybody thinks it makes sense, what we did?
There's one person. Oh, 2,
Yeah.
3.
5
Nice.
people, good.
Thank you.
We didn't fail totally.
Hi, thanks for presentation. I have a question regarding a Spring Cloud contract. You demonstrate that it's possible to generate stubs and from the user side for application JSON. Does it also support other formats for messaging like Avro or Protobuf?
So the question was, because in the contract we've mentioned application JSON, whether we support other content types.
Can I answer the question? Have you read the docs?
So if you did read the docs, you would have known that we do support XML, JSON, and binary protocols. There is an example if you go to github.com/Spring Cloud samples/Spring Cloud contract samples, you'll see an example of Protobuf. And in the latest version, assuming that we finish the refactoring of the internals of contract, the next thing we want to do is, because we bumped WireMock to the latest version, and it supports HTTP2, we'll try to support gRPC as well, for example. But we do support binary payloads.
Good question, by the way.
Very good question. Any more questions?
All right.
So if you don't have any questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.